2.04B11 146 horsepower, 2.44B12 167 horsepower. Most Outlanders are equipped with inline 4s with a displacement of 2.0 and 2.4 liters. These are twin motors. They differ in cylinder diameter and piston stroke. The older one has a block with balancer shafts. These are global engines developed and used by Mitsubishi, Kia/Hyundai and Chrysler. Surprisingly, they have completely different problems. Or rather, it is Mitsubishi engines that have no problems. There is also no main problem, the appearance of bullies. Although in rare cases, even if the catalyst is destroyed, it's ceramic dust, rubbed by the pistons, still leads to damage to the cylinder mirrors. But the cooling of these engines is fine, so they will not rustle the pistons. The only operational drawback of these engines is that they do not have hydraulic compensators. Thermal clearances must be checked every 90,000 kilometers and, if necessary, adjusted by selecting pushers. If the engine runs on gas, then the inspection interval should be halved. Otherwise, if you change the oil every 10,000 kilometers, nothing ever happens to these engines. The timing chain easily lasts 250,000 kilometers. The phase shifters do not bother. Yes, there are known cases when the driver-rider caused the balancer drive chain to break, and overheating of these motors also occurs, but solely due to inadequate maintenance. 3.0 V66B31 227 horsepower, the senior engine is a V-shaped 6. This engine caused problems on the Outlander XL. It readily turned the connecting rod bearings on runs of more than 100,000 kilometers. But by the third generation of this crossover, it was thoroughly modernized. A new crankshaft and improved combustion chamber geometry have improved the health of this engine. It was also deprived of the EGR system and got rid of the dampers in the intake manifold. True, after this the 3-liter engine lost its former elasticity and its traction characteristics, although, with a mileage of 150,000 kilometers or more, it is worth listening to the hydraulic compensators. Their suspicious clicking sound will indicate low oil pressure. If the measurements show low pressure in the lubrication system, then you need to prepare to replace the oil pump. True, when using good oil, the likelihood of such a problem is minimal. What exactly V6s suffer from serially are cracks on the rear valve cover. It bursts, then oil leaks out through the crack. The crack can simply be treated with glue, and you also need to keep an eye on the shaft seals. They begin to leak oil before the mileage reaches 200,000 kilometers. Oil may get on the timing belt. This is usually discovered much earlier than the timing belt slips or breaks. CVT6JF011E F1 Kia/W1 Kia. Two pedal versions of the pre-restyling Outlander with 4-cylinder engines are equipped with a Jatco JF011E variator. Perhaps this is the most common CVT on the planet. Since 2005, it has been installed on Nissan, Renault, Suzuki, and Mitsubishi. Since 2007, it was worn by the second-generation Outlander and the third generation until 2015. This is a surprisingly reliable CVT. All it needs is reliable ATF cooling and replacement of working fluid and filters. The instructions for the car indicate that such a replacement must be carried out every 90,000 kilometers, but Jatco has reduced this regulation by half or even 3 times. The variator has 2 filters, one under the heat exchanger, 2824A006, the second in the pan, 2824A007. Both, including gaskets, cost $60. Original ATF will cost $18 per liter. It is needed for partial replacement of about 5 liters. The level is checked with a standard dipstick. For refueling, branded ATF CVTF J4 is used, which has many other names, for example, Nissan NS3. There are tips that it is better to use CVTF J1, NS2 fluid, because it has better kinematic properties. In any case, both of these liquids are compatible. An important point about cooling the variator on the pre-restyling third Outlander, they did not install a radiator on the assembly line. They even removed the thermostat. It has been installed on the pre-restyling Outlander in this generation since the end of 2014, and even then not on all cars. If the owner came with complaints about the variator overheating, and this often happened on Outlanders without an ATF radiator, then the dealers equipped the car with a radiator. It was such a nonsense. The ATF radiator was finally returned to a permanent basis. This happened along with the first restyling in mid-2015. In general, the JF011E variator easily lasts 200,000 kilometers before overhaul. There are even cases where an Outlander with this continuously variable transmission drove more than 400,000 kilometers before it broke down. To preserve the resource of the CVT, you need to not get carried away with sudden acceleration until the ATF has warmed up. Well, if you had to slip, Then you need to switch from drive to reverse and back with a pause. At the purchase stage, and during operation, all vital parameters of the variator and errors in its operation can be read with the MOOT3 scanner. CVT8JF016E, F1CJC/W1CJC. Since the 2015 model year, along with the first restyling, the third generation Outlander received an updated CVT with the designation JF016E. In manual mode, it simulates 8 gears. Separately, we note that Japanese assembled Outlanders switched to this CVT in May 2014, while Russian assembled crossovers did this a year later, in April 2015. On front-wheel drive Outlanders, on the information plate it is hidden under the designation F1CJC. In all-wheel drive versions, W1CJC. This CVT is based on the same JF011E. All recommendations for ATF, its type, replacement method and regulations are the same. Both filters are also the same, but the pan gaskets are different. This variator does not have a dipstick. Instead, there is a stub. The level is checked using the overflow tube, the plug of which is screwed in next to the pan. After replacing the ATF in this variator, it is advisable to reset the oil aging counter. The valve body of the JF016E variator is more complex and more susceptible to chips in ATF, so it needs shorter service intervals with filter replacement even more. And one more repair nuance: it will not be possible to install a used valve body or separate solenoids into this variator, because it is required to record the solenoid calibrations in the control unit. That is, physically a used valve body will fit and even work, but, as practice shows, not for long and almost immediately with shortcomings and roughness. As an option, purchase a used valve body with an ECU from the same donor car. People have a solution that involves prescribing some generalized calibrations. In general, if the valve body and solenoids are worn out, then buy a new valve body. It comes complete with a disc with its individual calibrations. Let us add that you can monitor the compliance of the actual and required ATF pressure during CVT operation using an application that can be installed in a smartphone and even in the head unit. The application will communicate with the CVT through a scanner inserted into the diagnostic port. Actually, the health of the variator is the biggest issue when operating the third generation Outlander. When in good condition, this transmission operates smoothly both when accelerating and decelerating. If roughness appears in the work, it is better to take action in advance. It will be much cheaper this way. Jatco JF613E, W6 Asia 1E1 YS 6-speed automatic transmission. Only versions with a 3-liter V6 receive the classic 6-speed automatic transmission on the third Outlander. The automatic is, of course, Japanese, Jatco JF613E. The oil in it needs to be changed every 75,000 kilometers or every 6 years. For replacement, branded ATF J3 or its analogs are used. The filter is usually not changed, because it is only accessible after removing the pan. To get rid of a significant part of the old ATF, you need to drain it through the external fitting on the automatic transmission, and then through the drain plug, and then add oil to the level. This procedure needs to be done 2 to 3 times, because about 4 to 5 liters of ATF out of 8 are drained at a time. Yes, this is not a full replacement, but a partial one. It is best to replace ATF by substitution. To do this, the pumping stand is connected to 2 terminals under the outer tube. A 4-liter canister of original ATF will cost $90. Sometimes until complete enlightenment you have to spend up to 12 of this oil. By the way, Outlander 3 with a V6 engine, unlike its predecessor, is not equipped with a radiator for ATF cooling. This exception applies to cars manufactured in Kaluga. In the US and Asian markets, the radiator was installed. Note that in severe frosts, before starting to drive, it is worth warming up both the engine and the automatic transmission thoroughly, because there were cases when the automatic machine squeezed out the oil seal MD 747546 from the transfer case. The transfer case of all-wheel drive Outlanders is reliable, but after driving over 100,000 kilometers, small oil leaks appear on its seals. This was also true for the second Outlander. But on the first crossovers of the third generation, the factory installed defective oil seals under the drive shaft shank. They were even replaced under warranty, because the oil leakage through them turned out to be quite strong. Once every 80,000 kilometers, the oil in the transfer case can be updated. It drains through the bottom plug, and is refilled through a hole located higher and closer to the left axle shaft. You will need a liter of original high-point gear oil, MC 320282, it costs $33. The level is determined by the filling hole. Checking the health of the distributor is very simple. You need to turn on lock in the 4-wheel drive control and make several slow 360 degrees turns. There should be no extraneous squeaks. 3-liter Outlanders were equipped with a more advanced all-wheel drive system. They have an active front differential and an interestingly tuned system that combats skidding and slipping. Such cars can even drive sideways, i.e. do not interfere with the driver, but even help. And these versions are more fun to drive off-road. Although in some off-road situations it quickly turns into real estate. But that is another story. The main thing is that the all-wheel drive system in any version on the Outlanders does not cause problems. To keep this going for a long time, change the oil not only in the transfer case, but also in the rear gearbox. The Mitsubishi Outlander 3 suspension is simple and reliable. One of the serial sores here is the creaking of stabilizer bushings. The bushings don't tear, they just start to creak. They can be replaced with original new ones or non-original ones, including polyurethane ones. The issue price is $5 per piece. In the front suspension, shock absorber boots often tear around the circumference. Subsequently, dirt can damage the shock absorber support bearings. Original shock absorber boots cost $50, but you can save money by choosing replacements. The original support bearings, if the dirt has not reached them, last a very long time. They cost $20. The suspension arms front and rear easily travel 200,000 kilometers. This applies to both ball joints and silent blocks. Original front control arms assemblies will cost $130 each. Silent blocks and even ball parts for it are sold only after the original. The rear suspension has 4 levers per wheel. The front silent blocks of the trailing arms, $34, and lower wishbones, $7 each, are sold separately. Upper links, $45, $70 for the original assembled. The front and rear wheel bearings began to hum when driving up to 100,000 kilometers. Original bearings will cost $30 each. The Outlander has single-piston rear brake calipers with integrated handbrake mechanisms. In previous generations of this crossover, the parking brake had a drum mechanism. It is advisable to service new calipers annually. Just remove dirt, corrosion, and lubricate the guides. If this is not done, the calipers will jam in a position that is convenient for them. The paint layer is quite thin and soft, which by modern standards does not surprise anyone. Stones hitting the hood cause chips. In these places, the exposed metal slowly becomes covered with rust. Such chips rust much faster and even turn into bugs on the roof panel. Traditionally, this place is poorly protected from corrosion because it is believed that she cannot appear there. On some Outlanders, the paint on the roof swells in spots. These problems were usually corrected under warranty. In general, the first spots of corrosion appear on steel parts on the bottom and behind the bumpers. Those bumper amplifiers, subframes, some brackets and suspension parts begin to bloom slowly, but this does not lead to anything serious. The windshield is considered quite fragile. Stones falling into it can easily cause cracks. We'll also include fog lights here, the lampshades of which also burst easily. In an Outlander 3 configurations with an electric driver's seat, play occurs and progresses in the longitudinal adjustment hinges. The seat turns almost into a rocking chair, only the swing amplitude is minimal, with hard impacts. It's unpleasant to drive. Persistent owners force dealers to change the hinge mechanism under warranty. If the chair sways, but there is no longer a guarantee, then you have to make something and fix it yourself. The leather upholstery on the front seats bulges at the very bottom over time. No longer fits properly and tightens the seat. This problem was also solved under warranty or fixed in some homemade way. The glove compartment lid does not withstand loads, savory pops, and when something gets stuck between it and the panel. After careless handling, the rod breaks off, the whiskers of which keep the glove compartment lid slammed shut. As a rule, the rod breaks off on the left side. The glove compartment lid sags on this side. You have to either change the glove compartment lid or restore the integrity of the traction in some cunning way. A single 8X current distribution unit is responsible for the operation of onboard electronics in the Outlanders. It is located under the steering column and houses fuses and relays. There are rare cases when the windshield wipers stop working in this crossover. The problem must be looked for in the current distributor and specifically in the relay that controls the wipers. If you can find a relay, you can resolder it and restore the wipers to work. Otherwise, you will have to replace the 8X unit with a new or used one. Moreover, you need to transfer the encodings of the old one to a working block. Also, due to problems with the 8X unit, turn indicators, lighting fixtures, central locking and, in general, any electrical consumers may fail.